Good day. I'm Teresa Fredericks from Growing Businesses Using Projects with yet another video. This time I'm looking at how to write a scope statement. I'm going to be discussing its parts and we're going to be looking at a template developed for it. So what's the agenda? We're going to be looking at what is the scope of the project. We're going to look at definition of key terms, project objectives, requirements, constraints, deliverables, assumptions. We're going to be looking at what is product scope, what is project scope, and what are requirements. What is the scope statement? What is the project charter, which is a key input into the scope statement? And we are going to finally end with just looking at the template and explaining it. So let's look at scope. What is scope? Scope is the work involved in creating the products, services, or results of the project, but it also includes the processes used to create them, and it incorporates the requirements, what the stakeholders want to see in the products, the services, or results. The source documents for that, the main source one, there are others, include the charter, the project charter, and requirements documentation. You have to determine what is in scope and what is out of scope, and I've dealt with that in another video. So let's look at products, services, and results. Products, the item sold to satisfy customer needs, for example, a car, food. Products are easy, everybody knows that. Services, performing business functions. You could have reception desk services, you could have maintenance type services, you can bring in people to see about your landscape and all that. You have those kinds of service. Results are what sometimes give problems. There are two types. There are outcomes and there are documents. I want to restructure my organization. It's not a product, it's not a service. I have to call in, I probably have to do a change management plan. I might have to call in consultants. What comes out is the documents that will guide the restructuring of the organization. Or I'm a business, I am preparing food and I recognize that the plant is not working or the kitchen is not working how it should. I may call in a business analyst to look at the processes. So what they will give me are revisions of the processes. They will tell me what's the problem in the processes and what I should do. So it's documents. Or, like in Trinidad, we wanted to build a road to Toco. We had to do a feasibility study. What comes out of that are reports and recommendations. That informs policy. Results take up a lot of our projects. A lot of our projects are results type projects. So we talked about products, we talked about services. What about requirements? The term requirement is defined as a condition or capability that is required to be present in a product, service, or result to satisfy an agreement, which it might be a legal agreement or contractual agreement or other formally imposed specifications. Now, if you look at this door and you had to come up with a requirement for this door, what will it be? I felt it would be useful to talk a little about the types of requirements. For example, one of the very important one is the business objective. So that the Ministry of Education is building a school. The school building, the deliverable of that project will be the building. The objective is to build the school. But the business objective, why the ministry is building the school, is education. So that sometimes you can have a project successfully completed, but it does not satisfy the business objective. And so it is a failure. And I have an article on my website up to that extent. So the business requirement, you have to keep your eye on what the business is trying to achieve. What about quality? Quality is a main requirement. It speaks to any condition or criteria needed to validate the successful completion of a project deliverable or fulfillment of a project requirement. So you have tests, you have certification, you have validations. What about stakeholder requirements? And remember, government is a stakeholder in every project. So that whatever project you have to ask yourself, what government agency will have legal requirement or regulatory or whatever requirements that I have to comply with. You have to have the listing of your main stakeholders and what are their requirements. Because as you go through the project and you try to change, there are some things that you cannot remove. So you should do that kind of analysis. What about project requirements? They describe the actions, processes, or other conditions the project needs to do. Especially if you're in a projectized organization, there will be guidelines that you have to follow. All right, I just gave an example as milestones, but normally what procedures should projects use in this organization? What are the project requirements? And even it can be as simple as if you are doing work in a school and the school is in operation, you may have to carry out that work in the night and put things back in place so that the following day school work can take place. Then there's traditional transition and readiness requirements. They describe temporary capabilities such as data conversion and all those kind of things. And anytime you're changing a system, you should ask yourself, what training do we need? Because training is important. And if you don't have it in the package of requirements for the consultant and they leave, and there are training problems come up, then you have to call them back, and that's a separate contract. So even if they are setting up the system, also think of having them come back in a couple of months or whatever time frame so that they can address some of the issues that may arise and put it as part of this terms of reference. And then you have solution requirements. And these describe features, functions, characteristics of the project, product, service, or result that will meet the business and stakeholder requirements. They can also be subdivided into functional requirements, which describe the behaviors of the product, or non-functional. For instance, things like reliability, security, performance, safety, supportability, and these kinds of things. So we talked about requirements, but what about project objectives? It can be an outcome towards which work is to be directed, like the restructuring of an organization. It could be a strategic position. It could be a purpose to be achieved. It could be a result to be obtained. It could be a product to be produced or a service to be performed. The project objective is exactly what the project has to achieve. So let's look at what is scope. And scope comprises the project scope and the product scope. The project scope is work needed to be accomplished to deliver the product, service, or result with the specified features and functions. And always think of the knowledge areas. All right, so you're going to have communication and those kinds of things. You're going to have planning, so that the project scope is measured against the project plan, scope statement, and WBS. And one of the things that we sometimes miss in the WBS is project management. But that has cost and it has time. So that we have to think in terms of what are all the things we may need, approvers and things like that. What are all the things that we need in terms of the project scope? But what about the product scope? Here we're looking at the features and functions that characterize a product, service, or result, and it's measured against the requirements for the product, service, or result. We spoke just now about the charter. So the charter, we said, is a main document that is used in the scope statement. The charter is issued by the sponsor that formally authorizes the existence of a project and provides the project manager with the authority to apply organizational resources to project activities. It's only when this charter is done that he can go out and spend the money. Okay, at a high level, it ensures a common understanding by the stakeholders of the key deliverables. Well, you know what we're talking about with deliverables now. Milestones, which is the key dates that certain things have to be done on, and the roles and responsibilities of everyone involved in the project. So I thought it would be useful to put the charter next to the scope statement, because some people will want to know where we're getting the information for the scope statement. A lot of it comes from the charter, a lot of it comes from the requirements documentation. When we look at the charter, we're getting the project purpose, the objectives, the success criteria, high-level requirements. We're going to get descriptions, the key deliverables, overall risk, summary milestone schedule, pre-approved financial resources, key stakeholder list. When you look at the project statement, you have to know why the project was initiated. A lot of it will come from here. What is the project purpose and business objective? Product scope, description of the product, so that you're actually going a little deeper into this description of the product, service or result. The project scope, for instance, reporting and approvals, acceptance criteria, which you are going to get in some measure from the charter. For instance, project approval requirements, what constitutes project success, who decide the project is successful and who signs off. You're going to get some information there. Exit criteria, as we close the project, what conditions have to be met. Project ends in operations. So what do we need to do to be sure that the operations people can carry out the operations once the project has ended? All right, the project statement talks about the deliverables, exclusions, project constraints, project assumptions, milestones and agreements. Now, the team has to come up with what are the project exclusions. When you agree on what is going to be in the scope statement, you have to clearly state what is not going to be in the scope statement, so that stakeholders are not expecting the project to deliver things that is not going to deliver. We talked about constraints. Constraints are limitations. So we may have a funding constraint. We may have quality or procedural constraints. Now, these are two different ones, but I just put them together. Procedures, in that you have to follow the internal procedures, or you have to follow some set procedures. You have risk, you have scope, you have resources. The resources may not be what you need, what you want, but this is what the budget can accommodate, etc. The technology may not be the best. So all of these could be limitations or constraints, and time. You may have a set time to do the project. So when we look at the scope statement, the background, you're going to get a lot from the charter. The description, acceptance criteria, we talked about that. The deliverables, project exclusions, project constraints, project assumptions, milestones, and agreements. Why I put agreements? Because the key stakeholders should sign off that this is what the project is going to do, and this is what it is not going to do. Now, I have a video that illustrates a project scope for a market research project, so that you're going to be able to see exactly how all of these things are filled out. If you like my content, you give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Good day.